if my objective function is to maximize my happiness and my healthiness, then I want every morning to be a morning that I wake up happy, right? Happy to do what I need to do that day. And if I'm not happy to doing what I need to do that day, then for me, I'm kind of failing at this game called life, right? And so ultimately, for me, I wanted to create something that is a combination of all the things that make me happy and remove or get rid of or outsource.
So I'm here today with Jason Scott, who is the founding general partner at 525, which is an early stage venture fund. And before that, Jason led Google's startup developer ecosystem and was responsible for launching and running startup programs for Google worldwide. He's also the co-founder of Black Angel Group, A54 Network, and Net Zero Angels. And we also went to MIT together for undergrad, and then he later on went to Stanford for business school. So welcome, Jason. So happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's so fun to connect. I love that the MIT connection, as you highlighted. It's always so fun to reconnect with MIT people. You see the energy in my face.
Yeah, I know. I feel so lucky, and I can't believe it's been like over a decade now, but seeing us all.
Neither of us look it, so no worries.
Thank you. I need that. But just to kick us off here, I'm always curious about people's dreams when they were growing up. So what did you want to be when you were a kid?
That's such a fun question, honestly, because I love reflecting on that type of thing and drawing those threads. It's so funny. So when I first think about it, I'll do like chapters. So obviously as a little kid, and you can kind of probably guess if you looked at my LinkedIn header, but I wanted to be a superhero. And my LinkedIn header to today is the Justice League, and I've always just had this like cool concept, and this kind of connects to what I do today, but this cool concept of collecting the best of the people that are the best at their unique skill or their qualities, and kind of like being where the sum of all the collective or the people are greater than any individual. And so I've always been fascinated by that idea. Subsequently, which kind of led to, or probably highlights the fact that I'm a little bit all over the place, but I wanted to be everything that I was interested in. So I wanted to be an astronaut because I'm very fascinated by space.
Wow.
I ended up being, or my doctor told me I was going to be too tall to be an astronaut, so I aborted mission on that, kind of pun. Not really intended there, but then I've always been fascinated by biology, which was my major, anatomy, physiology, and animals, and so I wanted to be a zoologist, which I thought was really interesting. But then I remember talking to my mom about could I meet a zoologist, and she was like, I don't know any. Good luck finding one. And then the last thing that I wanted to be kind of towards like early high school, but I also couldn't quite figure out how to make that happen was I was obsessed with the Jason Bourne movies, and I wanted to be a linguist. I thought it was really interesting to be able to speak any language and kind of like adapt to any culture. And I think ultimately, and I guess the backdrop of this also is I was a dancer growing up as well, and so I loved like kind of just performing, entertaining, kind of like people and gathering and that sort of stuff, and all that to get together, frankly, is funny. There's like aspects of each of those things in what I do today, which is funny. I think there's like kind of obviously the investment in kind of like not all deep tech, but just frontier technologies and kind of this curiosity for the unknown. I think that's kind of part of why I want to be an astronaut and kind of discovery there. So I'm like really, I think humans and animals and just like life in general is like so fascinating. I've always been really into life sciences and biology and that sort of stuff. Then I've kind of been a digital nomad and a nomad my entire life. My mom was a retired Air Force, or is retired Air Force, and now we invest globally. And I think part of that just comes from just being globally curious, and I love like pop me in a random country and like kind of force me to try and adapt or learn a little bit of the language has just always been fascinating to me. And so and then of course like just bringing people together, and so I think all those things are kind of, I'm fortunate enough to be able to do a little bit of all those things. But it was funny thinking, it is just funny thinking on that question, because all of those were things that I remember I looked up to the degree of like looking up the salaries, like looking up like could I find people who did those roles, and frankly, honestly, I think if I had to choose today, if I wasn't too tall for it, I would have probably ended up trying to be an astronaut, because I think I still am really fascinated by the unknown, and I think there's that's the ultimate exploration there, right?
Yeah, well, there's so much going on in that space that, maybe later in life,
Maybe,
later on
yeah,
in life,
maybe.
you'll be able to go up into
Exactly,
space.
exactly. Maybe Elon's greatest contribution to me will be allowing me to go to space. So.
Yeah, okay. Well, you had a lot of interest growing up, and I could just tell you're very curious, obviously intelligent. So, what made you go into venture capital?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I wish I could say it was all intentional. I think for me, every career leap that I've done thus far has been just trying to edge closer and closer to the center of the Venn diagram of all the things that give me energy. And I used to ask myself this question back maybe a decade and a half ago, like, what are the things that I do or want to do when no one's looking or no one's paying me or no one's forcing me to do them? Part of that is just like really if I had to characterize my life, I used to say in one phrase is I've always, or my career, I guess in one phrase, but also my life is I've always wanted to be known as kind of best supporting actor for folks. I think especially some of the world's most talented folks, because I've never viewed, and maybe this is being, I don't know, I'm not trying to be overly humble or anything like that, but I've never really viewed myself as the most talented at like just any specific thing. I'm pretty truly a generalist, I think. I kind of thrived in elementary school. But ultimately, I think I'm really good at helping other people, being a thought partner, helping other people connect to the things they need to be successful. And I think venture capital is just that, right? I think I kind of went into venture capital, went out of venture capital, went into venture capital, went out of venture capital. But the reason I ended up kind of starting 525 ultimately is that I realized one key component of supporting people in their dreams is obviously funding, and you can't really get your dreams done without the funding in this world, at least, to see that see them come into reality. Ultimately, that's not the part that really gives me energy, right? I don't get energy from figure out terms of an investment or evaluation of a company. What I get energy from is really supporting some of the people who I think are some of the best, most incredibly impressive, aspirational humans on the planet, and helping them create magic, right? I really enjoy that. And I think I've always been a technophile. I always have. I mean, I think that's how I ended up in MIT. I've always been really fascinated by technology and kind of the forefront of technology. And it's really cool to be able to support people who are really driving that, right? It feels kind of wild that like someone that I could support at the earliest of days could start something that really impacts millions, if not billions, of people around the world.
And how did you come to that conclusion of being a supporting actor? Because I know you studied biology. I think you had mentioned previously that you wanted to go to med school. So I imagine there's a lot of people who had that thought when they were in college and
Yeah.
then realized that wasn't for them and kind of got lost. So I'm wondering, how did you come to that conclusion of what the Venn diagram and being a supporting actor?
For sure. I think luckily, so Stanford in their application, I used to say like applying to business school changed my life maybe more. I wouldn't say more than going to business school, but definitely changed my life in many ways just because it forced me to think or ask that question. You know, the old adage of like asking why 5 or 6 times to like really get to the root of something. Kind of being pre-med and like prepping for med school because it felt like the closest at the time when you're kind of 18 to 22, like the closest to really the center of my Venn diagram of things that give me energy. But when I really double clicked into like what it was truly is I just really enjoy supporting people and leading happier and healthier lives, right? I think like your ultimate goal, or at least, and this is my bias, but my ultimate goal is to be happy and healthy for as much time as possible, right? If I took the kind of I was about to make a calculus joke, but if I took the area under the curve, right, I want it to be, I want it to maximize around happiness and healthy, being healthy, right? And I think that I get a lot of energy and really like scaling that impact and allowing as many people as possible to be happy and healthy. And that was, I think, what drew me to medicine in terms of like degrees and like kind of traditional paths. But I think it is also what draws me to venture capital. And I don't invest in anything that I think is a net negative on the world. I think there are a lot of people who just invest to make money. I invest to have a positive impact on people's lives, right? Because I think ultimately the legacy that I want to have, oh, didn't mean for that to happen. Surprise.
Legacy fireworks.
Exactly,
Come on.
exactly. The legacy that I want to have is really about is about how many people that was able to impact in that way, right? And how many people was I able to help, again, maximize their happiness and maximize their time on earth. And I think that equates to healthiness, right? And so in many ways. And so that's kind of how I ended up being there. I think I would say I very much tried a lot of things. I worked at a bunch of startups. I did healthcare consulting. I worked in big tech, but I think a lot of it was also like really, again, like I said, really just testing as many things as possible that could be at the center of the Venn diagram, and then ultimately landing on something that really felt like it was for me, you know.
What you said really stood out to me was like wanting to be focused on happy and healthy. And I hear that and I think, oh, there's a lot of things that could tick that box of happy and healthy. And obviously you're multi-talented. So how did you come to the conclusion of venture capitalists specifically? And the reason why I think you kind of alluded to it, but the reason why I want to double click there is because I feel like there's a lot of multi-talented people and they're kind of confused on like, what skills should I leverage and how do I narrow the scope?
Yeah. So I think a couple things there, and this kind of gets to my Venn diagram. I think I'm more on the functional side. I did spend summers like shadowing in hospitals and such, and then I realized the impact. Of course, you're saving lives, right? So you're having incredible impact. But for me, the volume of people that I would be able to touch in that capacity as a doctor was just not. Again, I'm more of a breadth versus depth person, I guess, is the theme here. And then I took a step back and I thought, okay, this is how I ended up kind of doing the healthcare consulting stuff and kind of the healthcare life sciences consulting was, okay, maybe I can change systems, right? Because one thing I realized in that process was functionally, I'm really good at scaling operations, scaling ideas. I'm really good at operations strategy. Those are the things that I don't know, maybe growing up in a military household, or I don't know what it is. I think if my grandmother were born today, she would have been a fantastic CEO because she had a lot of these traits as well. But I think just a lot of the things that came natural to me, and we even joke in my own household that I'm kind of the COO of the household. But I love operations. I love streamlining things. I love scaling things. I love making them systematic and programmatic. And I think that one of the places where that skill really shined was in scaling ideas and scaling businesses, right? So I did the healthcare consulting thing. I ended up working for these small ideas within big companies. Then I said, okay, well, forget the big company and trying to change the or I don't want to call them bad guys, but change the big guys to make them better, I guess. Good. I don't want to say good guys
it's
either.
like a Herculean effort to like steer a big
turn the
ship
ship around,
a new direction.
Yeah, I'm not trying to turn the Titanic, right? Exactly. And so, and then I was like, okay, let's move to Silicon Valley and work at startups. And so I ended up working for some startups. And then I think I realized like, hey, to be practical, most startups fail. So I think you put a lot of eggs in one basket and kind of hope that this is the right basket. But I think I got really fascinated about kind of first and foremost, like how do you kind of maximize the likelihood that a company or idea will succeed, but then realizing that I had a specific skill set that really was helpful in helping companies get from a certain stage, let's call it kind of we've kind of figured out something interesting here to really scale, like I said. And so I was like, let me just help as many of these companies as I can, right? And I did that a little bit as a consultant for a bunch of startups. And then as I told you at the beginning of the conversation, I realized a lot of them, one of their biggest challenges is funding. And I think I played around I worked in venture capital initially, didn't initially love it, to be honest, like big venture capital. But when I was running startup programs at Google, kind of realized this, how the funding is an important part of the equation. And so for me, someone told me way back in my days at Highland Capital that, and it's funny because I can't even remember who said this, but I remember the phrase so much, is that if you can't find, if you know the firm you want to work for, especially within venture, but in general, like, and you find it, like, go work there. But if you can't find it, you probably have to build it. And I think I tried so many different like permutations of this type of work. And then I ultimately think I realized like, hey, like I might just need to build it, right? And so I wouldn't say I got it right the first or the second time, but with 525 have finally really figured out the right mix that allows me to lean into the things that make me personally happy, but also lean into my strengths. And kind of going back to that beginning point of like wanting to be a superhero, right? It's kind of the same thing. It's like, how do you lean into the thing that you're just the best at and become even better, right? And then hopefully you just become a piece of that puzzle of this group of the Justice League or the Super Friends, right? That can really have a big impact there.
How did you transition into starting your own venture? Can you talk about that journey? I feel like once you're already there, outside looking in is like, oh, it's amazing. Like you had a, you knew
Those
what you
those
wanted
people
and
are
you
on a
made it
good day.
happen. Yeah.
um, I will say it's hard. I think one of the things that has given me a lot of empathy for founders is starting my own firm now I guess a few times. I think again, kind of it started with that whole phrase that I mentioned earlier that again I remember was so powerful to me that stuck with me beyond even the memory of who said it was if you can't find the firm that is perfect for you, that you probably have to build it. And perfect is a relative term, I think, obviously, and a subjective term. But I think for me, perfect just meant a place where I could feel like I could thrive and genuinely be happy and excited to wake up in the morning, every morning. And I think in that regard, I was like, okay, well, let's try it. Like while I'm young enough to try it, and I tried it in a few different iterations. And then I think, luckily for me, since my job is support has been supporting founders, I had to kind of like eat my own dog food, right? Or like practice what I preach in the sense of like, I think of entrepreneurship as you have a hypothesis and you validate a hypothesis or you invalidate it. And if you validate it, you put more fuel on the fire and keep moving in that direction. If you invalidate it, you got to pivot, right? And it's like a decision tree kind of situation. And you just get closer and closer and closer to that sweet spot. And so I've tried a bunch of different avenues, right, of accomplishing the same goal. But ultimately, 525 is one that I landed on that really works well for me. And I encourage everyone that if you can't find the place that really, like, at the end of the day, again, if my objective function is to maximize my happiness and my healthiness, then I want every morning to be a morning that I wake up happy, right? Happy to do what I need to do that day. And if I'm not happy to doing what I need to do that day, then for me, I'm kind of failing at this game called life, right? And so ultimately, for me, I wanted to create something that is a combination of all the things that make me happy and remove or get rid of or outsource. I have this phrase, this mantra that I've had for the last year around automate, outsource, or delegate. But really just if it's something that doesn't make me happy, I have to automate, outsource, or delegate it somehow, right? Because life is too short. And so frankly, 525 came out of me just iterating a ton. And I think you just have to iterate. And you might find and learn that a lot of your hypotheses are wrong. Like you might think, hey, like I want to start a unicorn company. And then you get halfway through and you're like, maybe this isn't what I thought it was, right? And then you find that, hey, maybe I'm a lot happier just with my small to medium-sized business, right? Or maybe I'm happy just being a solo person, right? And being able to travel and like have autonomy, location autonomy, or not having to worry about managing employees. A lot of people, I think they want to be a manager and then they become a manager and then they dislike it, but then they stick with it because they think they have to stick with it. And then they're a bad, terrible manager because they hate it, right? And so like you should never force yourself to do something you don't like because ultimately you're not going to be good at it probably, right? Or not, and you could maybe fake it for a while, but when things get hard, you're probably gonna certain things are gonna start falling through the cracks.
Yeah. And you talked about how you had start and stops with starting your own thing. Can you talk about what was the mindset that you had to iterate, but also
Yeah.
not give up? Because I feel like it could be easy when you fell in love with an idea and then it doesn't work out. And then you can just think, oh, I guess it's not meant to be. I guess I'll succumb to the default of whatever job that I don't really like.
Yeah, I think again I had to like practice what I preach, and I tell this to a lot of my founders a lot. But I think first and foremost, part of what will wear you out is if you're just running in circles and kind of like not able to really think objectively about things. And so I force myself in my personal life and my professional life to define what success. And this comes back to maybe my very short stint as a biologist, where it's like in an experiment, right? You define what success means in that experiment. You define the like you define the variables and the objectives, the measurable kind of measures, I guess, that will mean, okay, we're going to put more fuel on this fire because we're heading in the right direction, or we're going to abort mission, right? And I think you have to do that in the context of validating your hypothesis around what you want to do with your career, right? Define while you're thinking clearly what success means, or what you need to get and by when get to, and by when to say, I'm going to put more energy into this, or I'm going to put more resources into this, right? And if you don't get there, it's not on you, as long as you tried your best and ran a good solid experiment, right? As long as the experiment is run correctly or well, then hey, you did the best you can do. Your hypothesis was just wrong. That's not anything on you. It just means you need to pivot, right? And I believe pretty strongly that, maybe this is from watching too many sci-fi movies, like, I don't know, like all these multiverse movies and things like that, but I believe pretty strongly that there's a way to get to any objective if you just iterate enough and figure it out, like, right along the way. It's like those puzzles that you kind of shake it and the ball kind of finds its way somehow to the bottom, right? It's like there is a way, right? I think you just have to continuously figure out like how to get to that next stage and break it apart that way, and again, be nimble. And I think that's how the most successful founders find themselves to be successful. They're not scared to, I mean, of course some people might get lucky, but I think most people have to really have and even if they're not thinking about this as explicitly, have a solid hypothesis, and be ready to know when it's time to either throw more fuel on the fire or say, hey, this isn't working, let's try something different, right? And I think it's important to really always take that approach to life, because I think, frankly, otherwise you find yourself just spinning in circles, and that's how you get exhausted and burnout and all that sort of stuff happens.
That's so powerful what you said. And I love that you said it's an experiment so that you don't have to tie your self-worth to it. That it's just, hey, this is the idea, these are the variables, this is what I did, and now I have more information to adjust, and seeing it as, I guess, more objective versus tying your self-worth or your ego to the outcome, and just seeing it as another opportunity to try something new.
I agree. I mean, I think one of those things, and maybe this is like, I say I say the best founders are a little bit like, have a little bit of arrogance and a little bit of humility, and it kind of like they know how to like toggle between the two. Like they know what they know and they know what they don't know, right? And they're not afraid to admit either. And I think kind of it's the same, right? It's like you have to like be confident in your ability, right? But also be humble enough to say like, hey, maybe something's wrong in this process and let me like change it, right? And I think like that is like it's hard. There's no real, I would need to think on this a little bit longer to like think on maybe like a formulaic way to do that. But I think ultimately like be confident in your ability to get there, but just know that it might take a different road, or you might have to take a detour, or you might have to say, hey, let's pause for a second and regroup and pull out the old school MapQuest maps and figure out where you're going, right?
That makes complete sense. And it's like, be confident in your capability, your strengths, your talents, and figure out how to rearrange things so that your talent can reach its full potential.
Yeah, and you can join the Super Friends or the Justice League, depending on which franchise you're a fan of.
And I wanted to hear about how you applied that mentality for when you've had moments of starting a fund and then pivoting. Like, can you talk me through like a challenge that you had and how you assessed that information and made a change?
I mean, frankly, a lot of it just starts with that. I'm a big mantra person. I have way too many of them. But one of them is like, if I wake up in the morning, I'm not excited about the work I have to do, then maybe I need to rethink the work. And so for me, that's usually the gut feeling. I need to like, people always talk about your gut feeling. I think I need to always like double click on those things so I can like understand it myself. And so the way I think of gut feeling is like, when I woke up this morning, was I excited about my job and the career and the choices there? And the people I get to engage with, and I mean, you're not always going to be excited about every single person, right? But like holistically, kind of the scale of things, like the scale is tipped in the right direction. But I mean, I've pivoted a ton. I mean, I think 525 itself is a child of a million pivots, right? Like one of the things I learned very quickly, and why part of the reason I call 525 a firm versus a fund is the traditional venture fund mostly live off of management fees, right? And then of course performance fees, but performance fees you don't get until the venture is one of those very delayed feedback loops. Most people live off of what is typically the 2% management fee, right? And so that to me in venture creates incentives that are just, hey, let me raise as much money as possible because I'm going to live off of that 2% fee, right? So if I raise, again, my $100 million, then my fund, all of our OPEX and CAPEX, et cetera, has to be $2 million, right? And so like a lot of people are like, let me just raise as much as I can, right? I think that though then leads to like fund construction, right? Because people just raise as much as they can, even if they don't think they can really deploy it, especially if they have a very specific area that they're deploying it into, right? Like a specific geography or vertical. And so for me, I was like, okay, well, what if we had revenue, right? And so part of one of the things that we do is we work and do a lot of startup programs as a service, as a vendor for various organizations, right? Because that's something that I get energy from, but also that supports my fund, right? Because if we're running startup programs, that just gives us even more exposure to startups, right? And even more exposure to other collaborators, and even more exposure as well to our clients, who usually are the big players in these industries, right? And so that has been one thing that really has unlocked a ton for us, right? The ability to not have to worry about like paying our bills and keeping the lights on, because we have a solid source of revenue and we can just invest responsibly, right? Similarly, I mean, when I was at Highland, I invested in the future of work, which is just like technologies that support kind of where work is headed, right? Like things like remote work and those sorts of things, right? And one of the things I've really like opened my eyes to and just become very bullish on is that work is changing, right? And the jobs are changing. And so our team at 525, everyone's fractional. They can kind of plug in, plug out as they want. They're specialized, right? And I think it's like, again, matching the right people to the right problems at the right time. And so I've never cared about like how many hours in the office you are or whatever. We don't even have an office, but like how many hours you are online, et cetera. I've always cared only about deliverables. And maybe that's because I was a consultant back in the day. So we were measured more on the deliverable output than like, at least from the client side of things, than like hours, right? In fact, they actually would prefer us to get the deliverable faster if possible because it was cheaper for them. And so my team is all fractional, right? They all have other things they do. They use this as a means to achieve their professional goals. It's very aligned around their professional goals, the tasks that they work on, right? Everyone is working on something that is building towards their next chapter in their resume, right? Regardless of what that is, right? And we always have a very intentional conversation at the very beginning of like, what are your professional goals? What do you want to do after this, right? Like, how do we design something that, again, you will be intrinsically motivated by as a project or a work stream, because it's very much aligned with the things that give you energy and where you want to go with your career. And so those are all things that, like, again, I just have learned, I guess, throughout the path that I've retained in 525. It's a little bit of a Frankenstein, right, of all the things that kind of I've learned along the way.
That makes sense. And as you were speaking, thinking about it from a formulaic perspective is aligning the incentives of what you were saying rather than just taking the management fund that could lead to bad incentives of just fundraising all the money versus no, you're not feeling desperate to raise money because you have revenue that's coming in, but that's also positive because you're getting that exposure to startups and having your ear to the ground. And then even incentivize with who works for 525, because it's not just like, oh, I'm here clocking in, clocking out. It's like, no, I'm here to build skills and do a good job. And my personal incentives are aligned with the business incentives.
Exactly. It will match the right people to the right problems. That is probably the first mantra I've ever had. Like, I remember having that in college. It was like, I like matching the right people to the right problems, right? It's like, make it who's the best person to solve this problem, or who's most motivated to solve this problem, like, let them solve it.
Yeah. And I can tell you're very self-reflective. Like, you have mantras, you think about your experiments and the hypothesis. What does that look like in terms of on a weekly basis, daily basis? Do you have a regular practice?
Yeah, that's so funny. I think it's I don't know if you count it. I guess this would technically count as nurture, but I was gonna say I think it's like inherent, just because I was an only child, so I spent a lot of time alone. So in that process, you learn to talk to yourself a ton, right? And so I think I've always just like been very comfortable with kind of entertaining myself as a kid, like having conversations with myself, like those sorts of things. It's just as an only child who grew up with a mom who worked a ton and traveled a ton for work and being in the military, I was home alone all the time, or kind of self-sufficient quite a lot. I think in terms of those habits, I mean, rituals, I do have some. I mean, some are less organized than others. So for instance, I have a lot of my mantras literally just in a note, an Apple Note on all my devices that are linked, so I can remind myself, and they're kind of pinned everywhere, and I have kind of those inherent reminders. I do the personal OKR setting every December. It's just something I've always done, which also every December I add a mantra. So I try to like, that's kind of why I have so many. I like kind of, now I'm getting old, so every year I add a new one that kind of is something I want to work on or something I want to move towards. I also, and I encourage everyone to do this, coming out of the Stanford GSB Graduate School of Business, joined, we all created a personal board of directors. And so I've had a personal board of directors that are just other professionals that happen to be in my business school class, but other folks that are in varying industries, various stages of life, etc. We've met regularly. Now we meet once a quarter or so. And they're my, like how a company has a board of directors, they're my life board of directors, right? And we talk through a lot of things like that. And I encourage everyone to have like thought partners. I think thought partnership, especially if you're a solo founder or a solo fund manager or anything solo, I think having those thought partners is really helpful, because sometimes it's just helpful to think through things out loud or hear from other people's experiences and not have to reinvent the wheel. And so those are the things I would say have helped me the most. I mean, of course, all the other things like having a therapist is helpful, but I think in terms of things that I've had for a long time, those three I think have really, really helped me to, for lack of better words, grow up, I guess, very quick. Like I felt like they've really helped me to feel confident and secure in what I do, but also just understanding kind of what I said, what I'm good at, and understanding what I'm not good at, and being able to balance that level of confidence and humility that I mentioned earlier. But I tell everyone, especially the personal board of directors, I think is something worth making sure you have.
For your board of directors, were those your peers at Stanford, or tell me more about
Yeah,
how you selected them?
I didn't really select them per se. We kind of were all people who were mutually interested in this, and at the time happened to be geolocated in proximity after the GSB, after grad school. And yeah, we were all kind of starting at the same place, but it's really crazy, like how a decade and a little after that, how lives diverge and converge, and you end up in so many different places, whether it's like on the personal side, going in and out of marriages, children, life events, etc., right? And on the professional side, going in and out of many job. Most of us have had many job changes since then, right? And so I think and job breaks and location changes and country changes and stuff. And so it's I guess we are peers, and that we're kind of in a relative age bracket. Of course, business school also is a little bit different than undergrad in that like people started at different times, but relative like 5-year age range between us, right? But we've all kind of we're all in very different lives, I would say, from on a day-to-day basis. And so that's helpful, right? Because you might not have gone through something today, but you might go through it tomorrow. And so helping actually, even if you're being a thought partner or something to someone around something you haven't gone through, one of the things that's really fascinating is when you actually do go through it. And then it's like, oh, interestingly enough, I've actually kind of thought through this before with someone else about their scenario. So it's actually really helpful, right? The first time I had to go through handling kind of a major kind of downsizing and kind of layoff situation, having helped taught someone else through that process for them was very, very helpful for me to kind of reflect on, oh yeah, this is what we thought about, this is how we talked about it, this is what I was thinking about from the perspective of the employee at the time, etc.
For the board of directors, I'm sure there's people listening and they're thinking, how do I even start that? So if they didn't go to GSB, they didn't go to business school, how would you advise people to figure out their board of directors and build it? Because also they may feel self-conscious of like, that sounds weird to message somebody like, I'm starting my board of
Yeah.
directors, I would love you to be on it.
I mean, you don't have to have titles. You don't have to have formality, right? We don't actually call it. We have a much cheesier name for it, so we don't actually call it board of directors either. But that's what it is. But you don't have to have titles. They don't even have to know that that's their role, right? I think it's just about finding people that you both trust and that you respect, right? And then diversity of thought. I think diversity of thought is really important. So like for sure, I mean, one is better than none for sure. But I think having a few folks that have diverse perspectives really will help you land on more nuanced decision, and a more balanced decision when it comes to deciding what you do and what path you choose. And so I think I would say they don't have to be classmates. They don't have to be anything, right? They don't. They could just be people you respect, people you trust, and hopefully multiple, so you have a little bit of a diverse perspective there.
I'm taking it in myself. So yeah, people you trust, people you respect.
Yeah, and some diversity of perspective. I think
And diversity of perspective.
yeah, I think the trust and respect though is the most important thing, because you have to be able to be vulnerable, right? And you have to trust that they're going to give you open and honest kind of opinions and feedback.
Yeah, you want them to be real with you and not just be like,
Exactly.
oh, great idea,
Yeah.
love it, 100%. In the back of their
100%.
mind, they're like, that's going to fail. But
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I don't want to
It's
burst
like,
their
oh.
bubble.
And then you also don't want them then texting everyone. They don't be like, you will never guess what Jason just told me. So the trust is important too, for sure.
Okay. And I was curious hearing about your mantras too. Is that something you look at every day? I love mantras, but I feel like I always have a good streak and then they kind of
Yeah.
fall to the wayside. So I'm curious how it is for you.
Yeah, like I said, I put them everywhere. So I don't intentionally look at them every day, but like I put them everywhere, that knowing I'm a big fan of like I used to read a lot of behavioral economics books, and and nudging is like an interesting concept. I nudge myself a lot. And so I love putting things in places where I know I'm going to see them, right? Or in this context, there are other nudges I do for myself, but for these, putting them in places I know I'm going to see them. So like I said, like on my notepad on my phone, but pinned to the top. So like I have to see it because I use my notepad all the time, and my notepad on my computer, same thing. I used to also sometimes have it like calendar invites that would have it as like a recurring event, just like a daily, so it doesn't show up like blocking my calendar, but like one of those things across the top of my calendar, my Google Calendar, right? I've pre-scheduled emails to myself before. It really just, I mean, you got to think about. I encourage everyone to like research the concept of nudging. I think Malcolm Gladwell does a lot of talking on that as well, but just in general in behavioral economics, the concept of how do you create nudges around kind of pushing people, in this case myself, to do things, because behavior change is really interesting. There's a lot of science behind it, and I find that fascinating because if we can like use those things on ourselves, we just continuously improve.
Exactly. I can geek out about behavioral economics or habit forming myself, where it's like, okay, I'm going to remove my phone from my room so I don't scroll when I first wake up or don't feel distracted.
I mean, frankly, how we become the best version of ourselves, right? I think I get excited like thinking that every year I'm going to be a better version than I was the year before, right? So I guess you also have to be that type of person that is into that. But I think like for me, like again, if my objective function is like optimize being healthy and happy, like it's just part of my overall objective function in life, to continuously be improving towards those things, the things that make me healthy and happy.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a strong North Star for you or something that guides you in how you live your life.
100%. I think, I mean, it's not for everyone, right? I think one of the things I've come to learn is that also we all have different objective functions, but I think it's important to figure out what yours is, though.
Yes, exactly. So that you're not just aimlessly moving through life.
Yeah, just living.
Yeah, just letting the wind take you wherever.
Exactly. And maybe that is your objective function. Some people's objective function maybe is to never be stressed and never make decisions. If that's the case, that's perfect life for you. For me, that causes me a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress. So,
Yeah, so be clear, if your purpose is just to go with the wind, then have at it.
exactly. If that makes you happy, and you can do it in a way that makes you healthy, I guess not everyone doesn't care about that, but still, I'm for me, I want to maximize my happiness, and part of that is making sure I'm alive as long as I can be.
I feel you. I feel like the years are going by quickly, so it's
They go
like
by so
even being more
fast.
intentional.
So fast. They go by very fast.
A little bit of a pivot. I'm wondering if there was a time where you had doubt and how did you overcome it?
All the time. I think imposter syndrome, like always, right? I think we all do. I assume we all have it. I think especially if you're constantly putting yourself in places that challenge you, I think what comes with that is inherently is a little bit of imposter syndrome when you first step into those places. I mean, my whole life, frankly, like I moved every 2 years growing up. So I would always kind of like start a new school and try and like reinvent myself or take on something more challenging, and like always kind of felt that a little bit, or aim for things that I didn't think I was quite qualified for, but still try and go for them. And then of course that happened in graduate school as well as my career, even starting my own firm, right? It's like, who am I to start something like that? But I think one of the things I tell myself quite often, and I tell my founders this probably more so. Actually, I think I first started telling my founders this, and then now I tell myself this, is if you believe what you're doing is good for the world, then you should go for it shamelessly and be bold with it, right? Because someone's going for it. And the worst case scenario is that someone that is doing something that you believe is not good for the world gets it, right? And so like for me, if I believe what I'm doing is good for the world, which I do, I think it's a net positive, then I remind myself I need to be bold and I need to be shameless about it, right? Because you only get, I believe I only get one shot. I only get one life to do it. And so I don't want to waste it just because I was scared. I've always had a little bit of that complex, I guess, in my life, but like have always just thought life isn't that fair and I won't get anywhere just based off of being a good human or likable or being smart, but I have to really like tackle it, right? And like go for it. And I think and believe that what I'm doing for the world, at least for me, believe that what I'm doing for the world is worth it, and is worth it not just for me but for other folks as well. And for me it's a little bit easier when I think about beyond myself, the impact of the things that I am doing or that I am building. When I think about my founders, when I think about my family, for the angel groups that I run, when I think about the people that I'm helping create generational wealth for themselves and their families, right? Like that to me is when I say like, oh, I need to be bold, I need to be shameless, right? Because that to me feels worth it, frankly.
Yes, it's being very clear about your why and your purpose, so that it's not saying that you don't have fear or doubt or anxiety. It's having faith in your why and purpose and having that as the courage to overcome that anxiety, to be shameless and be bold.
100%. And I think kind of going back to the board of directors, part of the benefit of that too is, or just in general, kind of like starting to like be bold and put yourself in certain circles with people that you admire or that you kind of think are maybe like better at something than you or whatever, is that you find out they all have it, right? You find out they all have imposter syndrome. You find out everyone is a little bit nervous, everyone's a little fearful. And so I think for me, that gives me a little bit of peace of mind, right? Like when I see someone that I'm like cool, calm, collected, passionate person in the back, but like to hear that you're nervous about it, like I'm like, oh, well, if you're nervous, then I guess everyone's nervous kind of thing, right? And so, but I'm sure, I don't know, everyone who's ever done anything great has been nervous about it and maybe felt a little imposter syndrome, unless they were, I'm sure there are delusional people, I guess, out there, but
like, we're like 99% of the world.
Exactly. Unless they were delusional, which I wish I was. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I were a little more delusional, but at the same time, there are a lot of people that have done great things that didn't think they were capable of it or maybe doubted themselves at some point.
I'm letting that sink into myself, of just reminding myself that anybody you admire has that doubt, anxiety, and fear, and it kind of takes the pressure off of yourself, that it's just part of being a human, that you don't have to feel shame or have that be a barrier for you even trying or pursuing things.
100%. And if you think that's not true, go talk to people, and I bet you they'll tell you. Like I mean, again, unless they're delusional, and then it's like, oh, sometimes you're like, can I be a little delusional, right? But at the same time, like, I think, as you said, or maybe even 99.9% of folks have felt a little bit of doubt or fear.
And I want to build off of that. Obviously, you've worked for corporations, worked for VCs, you have your own fund. I'm curious if there was doubt or fear of like, oh, this is a good thing I have going working at Google. Should I really leave and do something that may be more risky? Like, can you talk about that calculus in your mind and how you felt the desire to take that leap?
It's hard, right? I never fault anyone for deciding to stay in a situation that is secure when they're factoring in other things they care about, right? For me, for sure, like if I think about like some of the other goals I have, right? The financial goals I have to be able to do things for family, for friends, etc. When I think about kind of on the healthy side of things, right? When I think about like sometimes the calculus of like, okay, is the stress going to be worth it, right? Is the opportunity cost going to be worth it? I think maybe I am a little delusional, but like I think it is, right? I think like when I think at the end of the day, if you're pursuing something great and kind of again align with your objective function, then it is worth it. And if you're going to be happy waking up in the morning and motivated waking up in the morning, I think that's just going to make you really even better at what you're pursuing, right? I think there's no better motivation than intrinsic motivation, right? Like to just be really excited to do something. And I think that excitement and that intrinsic motivation usually leads you to being really good at it. And I think then again you become a superhero at whatever it is. And so I think for me, I just have to have faith. And maybe this again where I am potentially a little delusional, have faith that all the other things will net, right? Like I'll still hit the financial goals that I would have had if I kind of tried either the corporate path at Google or big venture or being a surgeon, right? Any of the other things back in my life. And I think I have, and I think I will. Sorry, I haven't have. I wouldn't say I have yet, but I think I will. But I think I have found I think I'm on the path that now I feel confident. But in those first few years, like it's hard, right? Because you're like, I know a lot of people who start firms, start companies, etc. They have to move back home at like 40, and you're like, okay, what's going on, right? And so I think, but part of it is just again, I guess maybe you're highlighting that we are a little delusional, but I think it's not delusion. It's just a little bit of confidence, and that confidence can come from delusion, but that confidence can also come from having tested those hypotheses, right? That I mentioned earlier, that you're on a track that's gonna pay off in the long run.
Exactly. As you were talking, that's what I was thinking of. You're not really delusional. You're a science man where I have a hypothesis and I'm going to have 1,000 experiments and there will be a way. There is a way.
To get there. There's a way to get there. I told you, it's that puzzle. You just got to shake it and find the little ball like makes it the way all the way through. I don't even know what that puzzle's called, but I remember those.
No, the visual is very strong in my head. I feel like it's going to be an inspiration for me going forward of like, okay, you just got to shake it up a little bit.
Exactly. You got to shake it up a little bit. That's going to be the 2027 mantra. Just got to shake it up a little bit.
I'll embrace it. I'll embrace it now.
Awesome.
Well, a question that I always ask people as we close out is, let's say there's a billboard and it's to inspire people to dream big and not be afraid. What would you have on that billboard?
That's so interesting. I think everything I think of is a little bit like maybe it could go either way because there are things that would motivate me, but I think things that motivate me aren't things that motivate everyone. There are three things that came to mind, and I'll just say all three, and maybe one of them. But the
okay, yeah,
like,
let's have 3 billboards. Let's go.
The first one like is the one where I'm like, is that motivational or is that scary? But for me, it's motivational. It's like life is too short to wait, and I think like the implication there is like start something, like get some momentum going, right? Even if it's something small, something that I find really motivating. The other one that came up was the one I said earlier, kind of, and this might be too long, but if you believe what you're doing is good for the world, be bold, be shameless. I think that's like something that I've just again I have always felt like if it's like A plus B equals C. If you think it's good for the world, like. Be bold and be shameless because why not? Because it's good for the world, right? It's a net positive for the world. And I think this is more for the people that maybe are still kind of in the corporate world or kind of waiting on someone to push them. I just have always reminded myself like no one's going to fight harder for my dreams than myself. And other people, and maybe I guess the other way to say this is other people are only going to fight as hard as you fight for your dreams, right? I at least get motivated to support entrepreneurs that I see are like fighting hard for what they dream of, and I want to fight just as hard because I'm like, wow, it's contagious, and I think it is contagious, right? And so I think same thing for you and everyone, right? It's like you meaning like the royal you out there. I think people are going to only fight as hard as you fight for your dreams, and it's a little bit contagious. So they see you fighting, they want to support you.
Yeah, so fight to get going, and then the more bold you are, the more people that will be blowing wind into your sails.
Exactly. I think, it's contagious. I think that excitement and that motivation. You'd be surprised, but people like that, and they find it refreshing, and they want to help.
Yeah, I'm a big believer, I guess, similar to behavioral economics, but just the people that are surrounding you really influence you. So I guess that makes sense with the board of directors, but just the people you're having conversations with or the things that you're listening to inspire you to think differently or be bold or do that thing that scares you.
100%.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Jason, for being here. I felt inspired by your story, and I'm definitely going to write down some of those mantras you had.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. And if anyone wants to ever connect, like just reach out on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to find me.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I feel like you might have so many people reaching out to you because of this.
That's okay.
Okay. Well, thank you again, and take care. Wishing you the best of luck.
Awesome. Thank you.